Hello and welcome to the week one edition of the Monster Pod here on TheLines.com. Yes, it's a new season, and with that we get a new name and a new partnership, as you see if you're watching us over on the video side of things. Ryan Noonan joining us from 4 for 4. Ryan, do appreciate you being here. Excited about the partnership, excited to get a different voice here, some different aspects on how these games might break down.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having us on. My other podcast partner, Connor Allen, will be rotating in with me here. We're honored to be a part of this. Obviously, love all the things that you guys do over there. I use your tools all the time. You guys always have the best odd screens. And absolutely excited to be here and talk shop with two guys I know ball and get different opinions. I think it definitely makes for a sharpening, iron sharpens iron, right? And I'm excited to be here.
Steven, he must not have listened to last season. He just said that you know ball. Look, what's going on here? I mean, listen to this. I
haven't even gotten to a game yet. Here we are. We're arguing
I absolutely love it. I mean, listen, this is great. You're coming in with like a clean slate on this one, buddy. This is good stuff.
Listen, Ryan, if you feel like, the 5-year-old child and mom and dad are yelling at each other from time to time, don't worry. It's normal, okay?
It is. It's going to be fun, though. Cannot wait to get through all these games. Football finally here. I know everybody out there been waiting on it, so let's get right into it. Pittsburgh Steelers and the Atlanta Falcons across the odds board right now. Mainly 3.5s. There is one expensive 3 out there in favor of the home Falcons. 42.5 is the total out there in the market right now. We know what we're kind of dealing with here. It is two different teams with two new quarterbacks. Two guys that have a lot of expectations one way or the other, whether it's to fail on the Pittsburgh side of things or if it's to win a division over on the Atlanta side of things. Ryan, you're joining us here on the pod. I want to kick things off with you. I don't know how high you are on either one of these teams. I have an incredible amount of Falcons futures tickets. I'm pretty high on this team top to bottom. I think the one thing that they really did need was just a quarterback in order to kind of easily be the best team in that division. Steelers, I didn't really have a ton of opinion on. I don't know whether Russell Wilson has completely lost his fastball or not. While I believe that he has, I also think that maybe you were in a situation there where your head coach didn't really want you last year. And so maybe it was just a really bad time, really bad situation. We got the Steelers Falcons sitting about 3.5 right now.
We're bearing the leads. The Arthur Smith Bowl gets to get started there, and it was just actually fascinating. I mean, look, the Steelers have an identity at least, right? So regardless of what we think of them, we at least kind of know based off of what they've done in the offseason, how they use their draft capital, how they approach free agency is they want to run the football. And they have obviously an offensive coordinator in Arthur Smith who loves to do that, loves to stick the ball in the belly of his backs. The problem is they're starting off in a very, very bad spot because they are missing 3 interior offensive linemen to start the season, at least for this game. Nate Herbig is out. Isaac Samoa is going to be missing probably at least the first 2 weeks. And then Troy Fautanu, who they used their first round pick on, all set to miss the opener in Atlanta. And then, we were kind of picking on the Falcons in the offseason around the draft time. Like, hey, look, actually the strength of your defense is probably the interior defensive line. You need some edge rushers. But that's actually a perfect matchup for what is going to be a problem for the Steelers here. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for the Falcons to be able to stop what the Steelers want to do. And I think we've seen that reflected in the line, right? This hung out basically all summer at 2.5. We did like an early show on Move the Line talking about like our first looks, and the Falcons at 2.5 seemed to me like, hey, if the Falcons are who we think they are, they should probably take care of business less than 3 at home against the Steelers. Now we've kind of cooked out to 3.5, which I think makes a ton of sense. The problem is too, like we have a beat up Russell Wilson, right? He's dealing with a calf, probably goes, but like it's a guy that eats sacks like it's breakfast. Yeah. I mean, like his pressure to sack rate last year north of 20%. Anytime you're getting kind of into the 20 range or higher, that's a problem. So they add Matthew Judon. There's probably a trickle down effect of what's going on in the interior offensive line there. So again, wish I would have had a bigger position on 2.5. The 3.5 is a little bit paused, just obviously around the key number there, but still would lean Falcons or nothing.
Yeah, Steven, we take a look at this, and there is an expensive 3 out there if you're looking to play the Falcons. We always remind people that if you're paying $120 on 3, you're getting a cheaper price than if you were trying to buy off of the 3.5 or buy on to the 3, whatever it might be. So not the worst thing in the world if you did want to pay $120 on the 3. My feelings on this Steelers team. I think that this is going to be the first. I don't know if you guys have ever heard it or not, but Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. I don't know if
is that true?
Maybe that's something you may have heard somewhere along the way in the media, but I think that the streak ends this year for this Steelers squad. I don't think they're going to be god awful, but if I believe in the Falcons the way that I do, kind of like Ryan just said, at home, getting it done against a team that's still kind of beat up here and trying to figure things out, I think the Falcons should be able to handle this thing. I'm fine with paying the expensive 3.
So full disclosure, last week I bet over 40.5. I'm sitting on a little CLV right now. It's sitting at 42, but I do not feel anywhere near as good about it right now as we record Friday morning as we did last week with Russell Wilson popping up on the injury report. He was a midweek downgrade from full to limited participation on Thursday. And for what it's worth, Rap Sheet reports on NFL Network that the Steelers are, quote, unbelievably conservative with calf injuries and would not be surprised if Russell Wilson, quote, was off his feet this weekend and potentially beyond. So I'm not convinced Russell Wilson's starting this game.
Yeah.
And if he's not, and it's Justin Fields, and that makes the market go even further out for the Falcons, we get to like 4. I might bet the Steelers at 4 because I don't know if the Falcons are going to be ready to go and firing on all cylinders with Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles, not playing at all in the preseason here. We are looking at 2 secondaries, especially the Falcons, who came into the season ranked by PFF outside the top 20. So that was the initial genesis of the overbet for me. But if Justin Fields comes in here, and we're going to get a bigger number on Pittsburgh, then I might be interested here. So keep an eye on the Discord, lines.com, top right-hand corner. You can find the Discord button. If I bet it, I'll put it in there.
Tennessee Titans and the Chicago Bears, 3.5 in favor of the Bears at home. 44.5 is our total. A lot of money coming in here on the Titans, and some of that money is mine. This has nothing to do with the Bears being bad this year. I just think that if you're talking about it on the other side of 4, which, by the way, this was 4.5 whenever I got in on the Titans, still on the other side of a field goal as we sit right now. I just wonder why we have gotten to this mindset where we just believe that a rookie quarterback walks right in and everything just functions absolutely normally in the NFL. We used to think that rookie quarterbacks took a year to get ready. And now, Steven, it's like this mindset that is, oh yeah, no, dude, everything's just going to be exactly how it's supposed to be from game one, from the day one that they step in there. I'm just not so sure about that. And honestly, this Titans team to me is a little bit weird because what if Will Levis is good? And this is like something I don't know and I don't have a strong opinion on, but they've given him a bunch of weapons. They've gone out and invested in the offense to make sure that they know whether that he is good or not when this is all said and done. And if he even plays better, I think, than league average, given what he's got on the offensive side, that this Titans team could be at least a little froggy in games and maybe get us some backdoor covers as well whenever they find themselves as bigger type dogs. So again, 4.5 is not available anymore. I don't think 3.5 is unplayable by any stretch of the imagination, but that's where I'm at here in this Titans-Bears game. What say you?
Yeah, I bet Titans 4.5 early. I think anything over 3 here is pretty expensive for Chicago. I'm with you. I think the Bears coming into the season, probably the one team that I disagree most with their market rating. I hear all your points about a rookie quarterback. I'll also, just harken back to our preview of Chicago, Matt. Go back and look at the 7 wins they had last year and the 5 quarterbacks of those 7 wins who were just absolutely dreadful. So I think even the defense coming into this season is probably a little bit overrated. I don't see much of a pass rush here for the Bears. And if that's the case, then I'm a firm believer that if you're lacking in pass rush and if you're lacking in pressure rate, I don't care how good of your secondary is. At some point, they're going to break down. So, listen, I'm not long on Will Levis, Matt. I'm not. I actually bet him 18-1 to have the most interceptions in the league this year because I think he's below average. I don't think he's ever getting benched. So you don't want a quarterback who's so bad that he gets benched and you can't win that bet. But I think Levis is going to be volatile. But I think Callahan's going to throw the ball a ton here. I think he's going to be near the top of the league in pass rate over expectation. against a defense that's lacking in pass rush here in Chicago. I think that fits really well for trying to cover the spread here. And let's not forget what Callahan did with Jake Browning a year ago. I mean, it was limited snaps, it was about half the number of plays as normal starters in the league, but he finished number 11 in EPA plus CPOE composite. So I have a pretty big belief in Callahan, at least trying to make this offense competent, especially when you add Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd to go with DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, Ryan, that's kind of the thing here that is at least mildly interesting on the Titans side of things. It's like Tony Pollard, Tyjae Spears, then you go Calvin Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, Tyler Boyd. If you believe that Treylon Burks has anything left in the tank whatsoever, if he wasn't a complete bust, it's kind of like there's at least intriguing stuff going on the offensive side of the ball. Now, the offensive line certainly going to need to play a little better so he's not running all over the place and getting hit all the time. But there's at least something there that leads me to be at least mildly intrigued with the Titans.
Yeah, they've had the Vrabel juice for a couple of years, right? Where they were the kings of backdoor covers. They would overperform. They'd be like, this team on paper doesn't look very good. Like, I don't know how in the world are they like 7-2 and like in the top spot in the AFC. Right? It felt like a decade, basically. Yeah. Look, at the number, I'm not super interested. I think you guys probably did a good job getting the 4.5s on Tennessee. It looks like there's Circus still has that if you wanted to shop around. Most of the market has moved to 3.5. I may be a little bit of contrarian on the other side of it for you guys too. Like we're talking about all the new on Chicago side and maybe like concerns about continuity and expecting maybe a rookie quarterback to walk right in. Well, we're talking about a limited snap quarterback in a room. So basically the entirety of the team is brand new. The offensive line has undergone a major overhaul, hopefully for the better. I'm still hesitant. Again, this is another quarterback that his pressure to sack rate came with him from college. Will Levis loved to take sacks at Kentucky, and he sure did last year as well in Tennessee. So I'm interested to see if that kind of continues to improve with better coaching up front and all those things, a little bit more time. But basically a new receiver room, a new running back core. There's a lot of like assumptions that maybe they hit the ground running as well. So like these two teams are so different. I'm just very interested if you were to go old school style and put this on the board, right? We would do like the morning shows on Sunday and you would go like position group by position group and like decide who you're giving check marks to. I don't know how many of those the Titans win. They probably, in terms of like their defensive line is better, to Steven's point, you guys both referenced the lack of pass rush here. I think it's okay. Like Montez Sweat was a difference maker when he came along. I like what they did in the draft with, Anthony Booker there, DeMarcus Walker. They kind of need to find someone on the other side, but the rest of it is really, really good. Like, what do you want in terms of defensive makeup? You want a shutdown corner. They have that in Jalen Johnson. On the other side, you want a quarterback that's maybe not an absolute dog that you can just pick on. And I think Tyreek Stevenson was awesome last year as the season progressed, better than they thought. They got an outstanding cover slot corner and Kyler Gordon. They got nice coverage linebackers. So like, I really think there's a little bit of variance that probably went their way in terms of defensive output late in the season when they went on a little bit of a winning streak. But I also think it's kind of a younger unit that can continue to kind of coalesce and improve. And I think the offensive line in Chicago is really good. Last year, they had basically cluster injuries that I think were affecting them. That was a problem to kind of have all that at the wrong time. So I'm buying the Bears on the season. I don't know that I want to lay 3.5 per se, probably a stay away. I agree with you guys though. I mean, this is going to maybe be an over game. I think there could be a lot of pass attempts that just could stop the clock in certain ways. There's also pick sixes involved here with a couple of hero ball plays for both these quarterbacks. So that's another reason to maybe look at, an over being a play. But on the season, again, I'm in Chicago, but I'm not a Bears fan. I'm a transplant. But I am buying a little bit of like the optimism here, especially with the early season schedule. And again, if they are going to be a team that's kind of pushing on the back end of the playoffs here, this would be a game that you would think they would win. So I like the Bears maybe on the money line. I think they probably win this, but I like the 4.5. I think you guys are on the right side of the number.
Yeah, Matt, just to Ryan's point about the lack of pass rush on both sides and maybe the over here, the market agrees. This has moved from 42.5, 2 points to 44.5 now. So just keep that in mind if you're looking in, watching this Sunday morning, that over-under's moved a bit already.
Houston Texans and the Indianapolis Colts. This is 3. Well, actually, there's a lot of 2.5s out there. So 2.5 to 3 in favor of the Texans out there. 48.5 is our total. There is 149 available from a total standpoint. A game in which I have absolutely no interest in betting, but I am so intrigued to watch. I need to see what this Texans team looks like in year number 2 under CJ Stroud. No team in the offseason got more helium than the Houston Texans. This was a squad where they go and they get Stephon Diggs. How's he going to fit in? What's that going to look like? How is all this going to work out? Joe Mixon being in the backfield. I want to see all that. Very small sample size on Anthony Richardson last year. Sure. Did he look better than I thought in the very small sample size that we saw? I thought it was going to take him all of a year before he even looked like an NFL quarterback. It seemed like he was progressing fairly well. But again, very small sample size with him there on that team. So, Ryan, for me, I can't wait to watch the game so I can try to better understand these two teams and move forward with a thought process on how I want to tackle them moving forward. But I'm still of the, hey, man, show me again in season 2, CJ Stroud, and make this work with Stephon Diggs, who was pouting on the sideline in Buffalo and was causing kind of a ruckus up there. And then, Anthony Richardson, yeah, it was better maybe than I think most of us thought it would be early on, but we had a 5-game sample size. What do we really know out of 5 games? So for me, intrigued to watch, but nothing going to be in my account on this one.
Yeah, I mean, probably a boring answer because I'm kind of the same. I cannot wait to watch this football game. I agree with you. Like, the Texans were definitely a team that got a ton of helium. I picked them to go to the AFC Championship game. I think they're a legit club. I also, given any opportunity, would just absolutely pump the tires of the Indianapolis Colts all off season. So I'm very interested to see. I'm just really bullish on Shane Steichen as a play caller, as a talent maximizer. We didn't get enough of Anthony Richardson last year to feel great about it. We only got 2 snaps with him at all with Jonathan Taylor. This is an offensive line that had the perception of being really good for years. And I think it was like just everyone loved Quentin Nelson, but like the rest of it was pretty bad. Well, now it's a really good offensive line. And now you have a dynamic tandem in the backfield that can do a lot of things. And part of it is I've been kind of an Anthony Richardson guy from the jump. And just the way he was asked to win at Florida, I don't think was really fair. We quote his completion percentage, but the guy was basically just asked to win 20 plus yards and on the seams. And there's no layup scheme for him at all at his time in Florida. So I'm bullish on the fact that Shane Steichen can get more out of him. These games were pretty tightly contested. Both times that we saw them last year, even kind of week 18 last year was basically a play-in game for the playoffs. So I'm interested to see. Obviously, the Colts in the secondary are a liability. I love seeing these teams, especially the Texans here. Look, we know that the old skeleton key right now in the NFL, you get a rookie quarterback who has showed any sort of pulse, and you build around him. And for them to be aggressive, basically on both sides of the ball, to just say, hey, look, we're going to go all in right now on this rookie contract for CJ Stroud, who just showed insane upside. I mean, like, there's a lot of stuff that, with CJ Stroud's been talked about all offseason. When you don't take sacks and you don't turn the football over, that translates. And so to continue to see, obviously we know growth isn't linear, but I think he does continue to take steps. The offensive line was like just beat up last season. Like, there's no continuity there, not a good offensive line. And now it's way better and healthy entering the season. So there are ways for the Texans to take strides here. I would maybe, like, if you like to get into the teasers, maybe a Wong teaser here on the Colts at home. I mean, we could tease them up to 8.5 would be interesting if you think this is close. Like, I think it probably is. I have a little bit of interest maybe on the Texan side, but like I said, I can't really pick a lane. I'm just fascinated to watch these 2 young quarterbacks, these play callers that I'm bullish on. And I think it's probably just a good football game to watch if we didn't have to have betting interest in it.
42.5 is the rushing total for Anthony Richardson, Steven. That's the one that I'm at least kind of sitting on and looking maybe to get a play in. I mean, if you listen to what they're saying, is he going to run less because we're scared about injury and like getting the comps to like asking Steph Curry to not shoot threes and stuff. So like, I imagine Anthony Richardson is going to get the designed runs along with the stuff that he just improvises out there. We saw what Lamar Jackson did whenever he is asked to, kind of put on the cape and do some different things in game number 1 of the season. So 42.5 is at least somewhat interesting for me on Anthony Richardson. That might be the only one that does make it into the account for me out of this game. What say you?
Yeah, I think generally speaking, I'm going to be skeptical of rushing unders on the Colts this year for props and passing overs, right? I mean, this is a team with a top 5 projected offensive line with Shane Steichen at the helm, who led the Eagles to one of the most dominant rushing offenses we've seen in a generation a couple of years ago, where they almost beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. So this is a stay away for me. I'm not going to bet it. I'll tell you what I'm watching for. I've heard a lot of talk about the 1 weak link in the Texans with all the additions they've made this offseason is still stopping the run on defense. I'm a little confused by it because if you look at the advanced metrics from last season, they're pretty strong, actually. So I'm not sure where that narrative is coming from. I certainly acknowledge that the Colts have a great offensive line and might be good rushing the ball against anybody. So I'm going to be watching that in particular, because if the Texans rush D is good against this rushing offense, then I mean, massive arrow up rest of the season. I'm very high on the Texans. I have them number 3 in my power rankings to start the year. I think, this rookie contract cheat code is for real, and they're taking advantage of it. So the other thing I'll just mention is, Ryan mentioned that play-in game last year. I mean, that was all starters, everybody all go. Texans were 1.5 point favorites in that game. All the offseason additions, Anthony Richardson comes back for the Colts. And as we record Friday morning, you can get a 3. You can get the full 3 on the Colts at a couple of spots. So we're getting really expensive on Houston now, Matt.
Jacksonville Jaguars at the Miami Dolphins. This is 3.5 in favor of the Dolphins at home. This one has been on the move. 49.5 is our total here in this one. Steven, could have got the Jags at a bigger number. The Jags money starting to roll in. We start to get some of this injury report news coming out of the Dolphins side of things. We're maybe going to be without Jalen Ramsey in this game. That's 2 straight DNPs for him with a hamstring injury that he's been dealing with for a couple weeks there in camp. So pretty big knock on that defensive side of the ball for them. I think too that maybe people were starting to realize that this number was a little bloated. One of the first bets that I put in the account as well was the Jags getting that big number here against this Dolphins team. But as anyone knows that took in any of the content that I did in the offseason, I'm a little bit higher on the Jags than market is. So I think this Jags team is still pretty good. I think this Jags team is certainly a team that, whenever you're looking on the other side of a field goal as dogs, is certainly a team that I'm at least somewhat interested in and seeing what they're and I think Brian Thomas actually is going to step in and be a pretty good rookie wide receiver there for them too. So put in the Jags. This number now on the move, though. As we sit, there are still 3.5s available if you want on the other side of a 3, but I would say I'd say act now, because it looks like the money is starting to pour in here on the Jags.
I certainly agree with your bullishness on the Jaguars offense. I like that Doug Peterson's trying to get more vertical and explosive, getting Brian Thomas in the draft. I don't think Calvin Ridley was very good for them last year. On the flip side, I'm pretty nervous about the Jags defense to at least start the season. New defensive coordinator, reports out of camp and preseason that they kind of have wide open competitions for the secondary, which means they don't know who their best players are most likely. And I mean, is there a worse offense to go against in a new defensive scheme than the Miami Dolphins with all their continuity, all of their weapons? But all your points, Matt, about the Dolphins defense coming in less than stellar. They have a new defensive coordinator. They are lacking in pass rush. Not only lost talent with Van Ginkel and Wilkins, but have several injuries up front here. It's a high total, but all of this adds up to me of just taking the over here. I bet over 49 in this game. Not too interested in the spread. I don't know if it's still there as well. I bet a player prop here. There was a rogue plus 130 on Raheem Mostert anytime touchdown at DraftKings. I'm not sure it's there anymore, but I don't think in a high total game, and a guy who scored as many touchdowns as he did last year, like, he should be minus every game to be an anytime touchdown for Raheem Mostert. And I don't see him ceding a ton of work, especially at the goal line, to Devon Achane. I still think Achane's going to be, an explosive 15 touch per game guy. So as long as Mostert is healthy, I think he's the goal line back here, and he shouldn't be plus money for an anytime touchdown in a matchup as tasty as this one.
Ryan, I actually am not down on the Dolphins. I actually think the Dolphins have a pretty decent ceiling this year. The defense, though, here kind of coming in a little bit banged up against the Jags team that I am a little bit higher on, north of the 3, was just too much for me. Sometimes we play numbers even against two teams that we actually like heading into a game. Jags, Dolphins sitting 3.5 and 49.5 on the total.
Yeah, I mean, we have to bring in our off-season takes right into week one because we don't have any like week one data. We haven't actually seen these teams now, especially with going from 4 to 3 in the preseason. We see even less of the actually starter units, so it's harder to really understand what we're going to see. It's why I think we have, like week 2 is so ripe for overreaction because we are seeing so much in week 1. I'm on the other side of the season on the Jags. I don't love their offseason. They played chicken with Calvin Ridley. It wasn't great for Calvin Ridley last year, but I think it was okay. And I think what he did fit really well for kind of how they use their wide receivers. I think there's some redundancy in Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabe Davis in terms of how they win. Maybe Brian Thomas ends up exceeding my expectations and becomes more of a dominant wide receiver and not just kind of a deep threat. That's how he was used often in college. I'm really concerned about the defense. Ryan Nielsen, the new DC, loves to play a lot of man. They're going to play a lot of nickel. That is terrifying against Miami. And he's been a guy that's like, this is my scheme. He's not this is what we kind of like to do. We'll adapt a little bit. It's just like, we're going to do what we do, and we're going to try to win that way. They let Darius Williams walk. They let Rashawn Jenkins walk. I don't feel really great about how they match up in this spot. I'm with you guys on the over. I think that's a good play. The Jags actually have a pretty interesting, pretty clear splits when they are in neutral split, or like basically the game's tied or even trailing by a point. They become super pass heavy. They were second in the league in pass rate over expectation when they were down by even 1 point. And this is both with Press Taylor, and Doug Peterson. So that's another thing. Like that didn't go very well last year. Who's actually calling plays? I don't know really how that's going to work. So I think over 35.5 passing attempts on Trevor Lawrence is a nice angle. I think you're going to be able to take advantage, especially if you have some injuries that you guys are talking about on the Miami side. So I like Miami a little bit, 3.5. I'd pay the tax on a little bit of a rich 3, but I think the over is probably my preferred play, and I really like that prop on Trevor Lawrence.
Arizona Cardinals and the Buffalo Bills. This is 6.5 pretty much across the board in favor of the Bills. 47.5 is our total. Of course, we know what we're getting here in the Bills, a team that everyone is trying to pick whole. Everyone's trying to beat up on this Bills team, but they do start out against the Arizona Cardinals here in week number 1, in which you get a team that is expected to be one of the bottom feeders in the NFL. Ryan, when we look at this, it seems like all off season, and myself included, it was everybody trying to figure out what's wrong with the Bills. How can I talk this Bills team down? How can I tell everybody this Bills team's not going to be near as good? Yet here they are as nearly a touchdown favorite in week 1. And, probably going to be a super popular survivor pick out there as well in survivor contests and whatnot. I'm a little bit higher, I think, on season-long type stuff with Keon Coleman. I'm not necessarily going to maybe jump on it for this game in general, but Josh Allen, one of the 3 quarterbacks that's gone for 4,000 plus yards over the last several seasons, and I just think the dude just figures out a way. And so I don't know. I understand where people are coming from with the Bills and kind of wanting to take them down a peg, but I don't know if we see it in this game against the Cardinals.
I don't think we see it in this game against the Cardinals either. This is another one of these, and I think we kind of the whole week 1 slate, right? I'm fascinated to watch this game. I'm not sure who the Bills are in terms of their identity. And that doesn't mean I don't think they're still going to be good. And when you have Josh Allen, who is, I think, without question, the second best quarterback in the league. And again, if he plays in a different era and doesn't have Patrick Mahomes, he's dynamic. And with a massive shift in terms of schematics, what they did with Ken Dorsey and Joe Brady last year in terms of pass rate over expectation, just overall, drop back rate and all those different things in terms of the percentage of yards gained through the air versus on the ground. It was a shift, but they didn't run a lot of 12 personnel. They did basically 2 tight ends. And I think that's the early perception is that we're going to see a lot of 12. They didn't really do that last year. It was 15% of the snaps after Joe Brady took over. So I want to see what their personnel groupings look like more than anything. I don't get nerd out on anyone here, but their inability right now on paper to be multiple, because it seems like based off of who they're going to have on the field from a wide receiver standpoint or a pass catcher standpoint is going to be indicative of what they're going to do schematically. No one wants to talk about Mac Hollins being this fantasy asset or a guy we want to look at on props, but he looks like he's going to be out there a lot. And part of it's because he's a terrific run blocking wide receiver, but does that play their hand? If you're the other side and you see him out there, they probably want to have Keon Coleman out there if they're going to be on passing downs. They have kind of redundancy with Samuel and Shakir in terms of both those guys have won in the slot throughout their career. We're going to see Samuel on the outside a little bit more. That hasn't been a thing for him. So I'm really just fascinated to see how they line up and play. A lot of turnover on the defensive side too. The Matt Milano injury is really impactful. Dorian Williams steps in there, but like he is definitely a guy that has his pulse on everything that goes on in terms of like the spine of the defense. Obviously, and now you have your safeties that have been there forever. Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde are gone, and it's been like Taylor Rapp was their third safety last year. He is by far their clear one, and now they're trying to figure out who's 2 and 3. So like in terms of who they are down the middle is going to be a change. So again, this might not bite them yet at home against the Cardinals, but I'm just fascinated to see just from who's on the field for the Bills this season. So again, 6.5. Again, a money line pick or something like that. You said survivor picks probably in play. Same thing. There's a lot of intrigue on the Cardinals and who they are this year too. But again, they still don't have a pass rush, and against a quarterback that just doesn't take sacks, that's going to be a problem here. When he has time and he can kind of create, he wins. So the Bills win this football game. I just don't know if it's going to be by margin or not.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up just who's going to be out on the field as well. If you listen to the beat writers, they love Ray Davis. They want Ray Davis to be a thing. They want Ray Davis to happen. I'm curious if I don't take a stab here early on a just anytime touchdown or something for Ray Davis just before try to get in before the market like catches up to the fact that it seems like James Cook doesn't have just a stranglehold on this backfield either. So yeah, I'm interested to see how much he fits in all this as well. Steven, 6.5, pretty big spread here in week 1.
It is. I'm looking more at the total here. I bet under 48.5. We're sitting at 47 on Friday morning. It's kind of a key-ish number. If you can get 47.5, I'd still be good on that. Just know you're probably risking a push here, potential 27-20 final score with a spread of 6. Here's why I bet the under, because on paper, it seems like the Cardinals are a total over team for a lot of weeks this year. Their defense is dreadful. They get behind early. You have Kyler Murray and his weapons being able to probably move the ball in some garbage time situations. That's going to lend itself to probably a lot of overs this year. But this particular game, with what Ryan was talking about, potentially, wanting to run the ball, having a wide receiver out there is more of a run blocker than a pass catcher. I think the Bills have longer, successful drives, but it takes longer, which is going to lend to fewer total points overall. The other side here, when Arizona has the ball, if they run the ball successfully, and I think they will, then that's going to probably lower the total in the game. You're looking at a Buffalo defense that their weakness last year was against the run. They were 24th in rush EPA allowed. And if you look at PFF grades for their defensive line, it's a lot of guys who are very good pass rushers, but liabilities in the run game. Ed Oliver was about a 68 PFF grade, but 55.5 in his run defense grade. So I do think Arizona maybe runs the ball well here. They drafted a beast of a run blocking tight end, Tip Raymond, in the 3rd round. And if they get behind and they have to throw the ball a lot here, I think that's exactly what this Buffalo defense is built to stop. I mentioned the pass rushers, but also 3 really quality cornerbacks in the secondary. Christian Benford, Rasul Douglas, Teron Johnson, all with PFF coverage grades over 80 last year. So really, any type of game script I can kind of foresee here for Arizona, I think it's going to be hard to get to, an upper 40s, low 50s total in this game.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good take, good look there in that one for sure. I think you're only sweating this if like they get down 17-0 early, and then it's kind of like
time,
right?
Like
they get down 17-0 early, then it's like maybe you're not loving your bet too much there in that one. Maybe the least intriguing game of the week, the New England Patriots and the Cincinnati Bengals. This is 8.5 in favor of Cincinnati. There's one book out there all the way up to 9.5. 40.5 to 41 is our total. This just screams teaser, taking Cincinnati down to 2.5, putting them in there with somebody else that you like this week. Steven, look, it doesn't matter whether Jamar Chase plays or not. Cincinnati's going to win this game. Patriots are the least talented team in the NFL. And they're not going to go on the road in week 1 and win this game at Cincinnati. I just don't know if Cincinnati keeps their foot on the gas the entire game, given the situation they've got going on. Obviously, just getting Burrow back, having a little bit of question mark at the wide receiver position, et cetera, et cetera. So I am fine in this in a teaser leg. There is another very obvious one that you might want to pair it with. We'll talk about a little bit later in the podcast here, but getting Cincinnati down under a field goal, I'm fine with that all day long if anybody wants to go that direction. I just don't know how long they're going to keep it going here against New England, so I'm a little skittish on the full game line.
Yeah, you and I are under on the win total for the Patriots, even though it's 4.5.
Yeah.
We can reassess if and when Drake May takes over as starting quarterback. I've done the teaser too. We'll mention who we paired it with later in the show, but it was the easiest teaser leg for me to add this week for sure. I'll just kind of mention what I'm looking for in this. Last few seasons, the Bengals have been a team that really haven't gotten off to good starts. I want to see this defense get off to a good start against an absolute disaster of an offensive line with a clearly below average quarterback and a clearly below average wide receiver core. This Cincinnati defense was a complete train wreck last year. They were bottom 5 in the league in a ton of advanced metrics. I'm at least a little encouraged by some of the offseason moves. They are now pretty much projected around league average for their front 7, their D-line, their secondary. So if they give up points in this, then that's a massive red flag moving forward. But yeah, I think they win the game by a field goal or more at the very least.
Yeah, Ryan, I think the other thing I'm just looking at here is it is now revamped offensive line version 3.0 there in Cincinnati, because they've tried to revamp it 2 other times and protect Joe Burrow. So, how do they hold up against this New England defense that, again, shouldn't be killers on the pass rush at all? So maybe there would be signs of like, oh no, if Joe Burrow's feeling a bunch of pressure out of this defensive line. So maybe that's at least something else that we can take from this game and move forward with. Does this offensive line protect Joe Burrow against a pass rush that we're not all that worried about?
Yeah, so I'll show my hand here. No one's going to feel sorry for me. I'm a Patriots fan from the area originally.
Yeah, definitely nobody feels sorry for you.
Yes, we do not.
Look, we had a nice 25-year run.
Yes,
and look, it's hyperbole for sure, and they're going to win a football game. I don't see it on the schedule. I'll tell you that right now. I don't see where it is on the schedule currently. The fact that they have the hardest schedule in the league is it's really tough, and it's super hard to start. And look, I know Jacoby Brissett knows his lot in life, and he's happy to continue to be in the league, and he's probably happy to still be a week 1 starter. But can you imagine, like, if it was you and they're like, hey, look, we can't throw Drake May out in this situation.
You're only getting this job because we don't want to kill our rookie. Yeah. You only have this job so that we don't kill our rookie quarterback.
Yeah, no, go for it, man. Like, let's go get it. Like, he's like, I could cash the check the same. Yeah, I could be easier if I could walk to the bank, but you're not going to let me walk to the bank. So yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be rough in New England. They do have, like, if there's anything that's good, we thought it was going to be the defense, and then like Christian Barmore has the blood clots, and then they trade Matthew Judon. So even this is going to be a problem. They do have some young pass rushers that, as a fan, I'm excited to see, but they're not going to be a problem for anyone really in this league over time. So yeah, it's the Bengals who start off slow, who luckily get the Patriots in week 1, and we figure out what the Bengals are later in the season. I'm a little bit bullish on them in terms of who I think they could be this season. But I'd love to see it a little bit too. Obviously, we're dealing with some unknowns with, a wrist injury that no one's really ever had before, especially at quarterback, and a situation in terms of Jamar Chase. Like, I'm excited about Jamar Chase in the slot this season. If we can ever get him on the football field, Tyler Boyd moving on bodes really well for a slot receiver. It's been going up and up and up a little bit. We can get like 40%. Look what happened to CeeDee Lamb when they just moved him in the slot. Mm-hmm. Like, you could see Jamar Chase explode this season for this offense. So yeah, New England's in trouble. They're not going to cover this number. And good luck, Jacoby Brissett.
Carolina Panthers and the New Orleans Saints. This is 3.5-4 in favor of the Saints at home. 41.5 is the prevailing total out there. There is 142. If you look at this one, everybody knows, yes, I am. You can see I'm from Louisiana. So kind of like, Ryan, what you're talking about, I do not think the Saints are going to be good at all this year. I'm probably the lowest on the Saints in the entire market out there. I don't like really anything about this team, to be honest with you. Everything from the head coach all the way down to the quarterback, to everything in between. So I'm at least intrigued by the 4 on the Panthers, in which you kind of look and you say, you look at that situation last year, and I do understand that people go, dude, that team was absolutely atrocious. And I agree, but it was not a situation for Bryce Young to come in and succeed. I mean, they were the least talented team by far. And, they at least went out and tried to do some things and get him a little bit more around him. And so I think there's at least something to latch onto here if you want to hold him to hope for this Panther squad. And on the other side of a field goal, I guess one of the teams that I think could end up being, when it's all said and done, one of the worst teams in the league too, in the Saints. I'm at least intrigued, not in the account quite yet, but I'm not going to say this isn't at least going to be a contest play for me or something like that, in one of the pick'em contests. Cause I think the other side of 3 against anytime a team's on the other side of 3 against the Saints, I'm going to be intrigued.
Yeah, it's probably right. It's a stay away for me for sure. Yeah. I don't know who the Saints are, right? And that's kind of what you're talking about. Like, I don't know what their identity is. And they just continue to kick the can down the road with what they do, circumventing the cap. And like, it does just catch up, right? You just continue to bleed talent year over year, and you can't really, respond properly. But the problem is like, I also don't understand some of this like Panthers optimism in the marketplace either. Cause it's kind of been like one of these things where, everyone's picking the Falcons, and the Saints, we don't know who they are, and the Bucs, people want to have regress. So it's just like, well, let's back the Panthers. And I don't really understand it. I think there's some fake sharp vibes with Dave Canales here. And I know like Dave Canales has been celebrated a little bit. And look, he was with Pete Carroll forever in Seattle, and they revitalized Geno Smith. And then last year, I was massively underweight on anything that was going on with the Bucs. And then they overperformed. They made the playoffs and won a playoff game. But like, in terms of optimal play calling, it was so much run, pass. They were so bad at running the football, and he just continued to do that. Regardless, second and 10 after it didn't work on first down. Okay, now Baker saves us. They were the best third down team in the league, and they were the worst team on early downs. And that's kind of what our problem was in Seattle with Pete Carroll, right? It was like, man, if Pete Carroll could just ever get into this century and start to be a little bit more of, forward thinking and throw on early downs. Well, look, maybe there's a little bit of Canales in that too. And now defense kept them in the game even a little bit last year. And that's tough to say for a team that won 2 games. They spent the entire offseason getting older and worse. They lost Frankie Louvu, Dante Jackson, Jeremy Chin, and Von Bell. They traded Brian Burns for 60 cents on the dollar after they could have got just a killing 2 years ago. So like, I like Elijah Evero as a defensive coordinator, but he's got his work cut out for him here too. So I'm not really bullish on the Panthers in a sense where I want to kind of go with you and say, I don't know what the Saints are and what they're going to do to you. They were kind of the bizarro Bucs. They were really bad on third downs, and they were really efficient on first and second down. So like, we need to figure out what they are there. I'm excited at least about the offensive coordinator. Can we scheme some more layups for Chris Olave, who I think is really good? Let's allow that kid to win over the middle, short and intermediate versus just having him win in the perimeter. I think that bodes well. Can they get anything out of the secondary guys? How involved is Taysom Hill? Is that a good thing or not? Like, I don't know who they are. But this is kind of a stay away for me because I'm not buying the Panthers love either.
Steven, the other thing to add in this, if you have not heard any of the interviews with Xavier Leggett, you should go in. You should listen to him talk. He is a guy that you need to hear speak at least one time in your life because it's very interesting. If you're wondering, when he opens his mouth, you're like, oh, that is quite interesting. Wasn't really expecting that. Look, I like the addition of Deontay Johnson on the offensive side of the ball. They actually have an offensive line that isn't complete garbage. Now they do have a couple of garbage spots on the offensive line, but at least it's not 5 across. And, look, I don't know. I guess I'm a little bit more optimistic on the defensive side of things because I think there's a non-zero chance that you kind of a sum of the parts type deal where, JC Horn plays good. Jackson plays well. You got Woods at safety, Josie Jewell sitting there at the linebacker position. Maybe Clowney's not completely done. You got a really good player in Derek Brown. So I don't know. I'm not as down, I think, on the defense. I think it could keep them at least close in some of these games. I don't know how many games they win, but we're betting against a spread.
It seems like there's at least a decent amount of disagreement in the market because this line keeps ping-ponging around, gets the 3.5, and Saints money comes in, gets the 4.5, and some Panthers money comes in. We're just settled in around 4 right now on Friday morning. Let me just
anytime you start off a game like that, you should just be like, I'm taking a pass.
But I'm not.
If you have to take a giant deep breath sigh like that, then like you should just be like, I'm passing on the game. Like, what do you do? Why are you about to bet this game that you literally had to start with like that? Like, what's going on?
It's a full slate, Steven. You don't have to go at it.
Listen, Ryan, I understand because this is your first show with us, but like Matt, we've been doing the show for 4 years. What are you new here? Come on, man. Like I'm betting Panthers +4
All right.
in this game. I've kind of decided at this point in the Dennis Allen, Derek Carr experience that I will never, ever, ever lay more than a field goal with the New Orleans Saints. I'm just not doing it. And certainly Olave is great. And Kamara is going to be check down Charlie out there. But, this offensive line looks putrid.
Yes.
I mean, it's really, really bad. Ryan Ramchek's going to miss the entire season. All the reports out of preseason and camp were that they're just getting dominated by the Saints defensive line in practice. So this new offensive coordinator better pull a Mike McDaniel into it and just get the ball out of Derek Carr's hands as quickly as possible every single pass play so that the offensive line doesn't matter. They need to scheme around these offensive line issues. So on the other side here with the Carolina, that's really, Ryan, the biggest thing that I'm going to be looking for, because I certainly see in the advanced metrics from Tampa Bay with Canales last year that, they kind of got lucky here a little bit. So was that play calling because Todd Bowles is old school and wants to run it into the line on early downs until, the sun sets? Or is Canales, now that he's free and running the show himself, actually going to be a little bit more plus EV in his play calling? So that's the biggest thing that I need to watch, that I'm not sure we're going to know in the first week, 2 weeks, but hopefully in the first month, we figure that out. Just against this mediocre at best New Orleans Saints team, I want to lean into the Panthers just not being 32 out of 32 in the NFL. And I think that's what this spread implies, Matt. Like, you tell me if you disagree, but for the Saints to be 4-point favorites, I think this is still saying the Panthers are the worst team in the NFL, and I just don't think that's the case coming into this season.
Certainly with my power ratings, this doesn't add up. And like I said, it's certainly be a contest play for me. I just don't know if it'll actually make the account when it's all said and done. Minnesota Vikings on the road at the New York Giants. This is a 1.5 in favor of the Vikings on the road. 41.5 is our total in the your guess is as good as mine game of the week. In this one. Yeah. Your guess is as good as mine. I'm slightly leaning towards the over, because I just wonder if we don't see just some wackiness in this thing where like it turns into like, oh, what the hell? Like Sam Darnold has found Justin Jefferson for 225 yards in this game somehow. And oh my God, Malik Neighbors is everything we thought. And next thing you know, he's going for it. I mean, that wouldn't surprise me. I certainly would never play an under, even though I know this nobody's hype on either one of these teams, but that's kind of my only real sentiment here, Steven. I mean, who the hell knows what we're going to see in this one?
It's a total pass for me. I won't have a bet in this game. I at least wonder a little bit about the over. 41 is a pretty low total for two play callers that we at least respect in Kevin O'Connell and Brian Dable. And Dable is confirmed to be taking over the play calling again. It still doesn't change that Daniel Jones is the quarterback, but you have a really bad Giants secondary, but you also have a really good Giants defensive line. So just too much cloudiness here, too much uncertainty for me. I will be watching to see if we get a decent performance out of the Vikings and if Flores is going to keep blitzing as crazy as he did last year.
Yeah, I mean, there are things to pull from all of these games for sure, but that doesn't mean we have to bet them all. Which, listen, if we just got through a game and Steven like instantly said he had no bet in it, that game's going to be tough to pull the trigger on, because like Steven, I can't believe we got this far in the offseason. You didn't at least have one thing from everyone.
I'm not shy, Matt.
Yeah, on the slate here. Ryan, maybe you have a different opinion than us on this one. I just, boy, talk about two teams that are really confusing for me.
This is great. I love that I'm here for this. This is my favorite game on the slate. I'm so excited to watch this football game. I am a defensive sicko. Right? I like to bet tackles. I bet sacks. I love all the stuff. I'm in the weeds on it every week. It's how I make my hay. I cannot wait to watch in a game that we're going to have a ton of games. And like this one is not super sexy. I want to see what is going to happen with Brian Flores blitzing his face off against Daniel Jones. I think it is going to be absolutely fascinating to watch. And like Flores is on an island in terms of what he does as a play caller. It's very unique. They do a great job at bringing players from all levels. And they did a good job this offseason for like everyone loves all the other teams in the division. And like, I get it. Minnesota, I think, is comfortably the fourth in that division. I just don't think that they're actually that bad of a football team. And I think they're going to be able to beat up on bad teams. I think the Giants are probably that. Minnesota blitzed on 48.5% of their defensive snaps last year. For context, there were like a handful of teams at top 30. Most teams are nowhere near that mark. And they lost some talent, but they did a great job of bringing in guys that kind of fit the scheme. Van Ginkel was a guy that Flores drafted when they were in Miami. They lost Daniil Hunter, but they brought in Dallas Turner in the draft. They signed Jonathan Grenard from Houston, who's been really efficient off the edge for a handful of years. They use like Josh Metellus in so many different ways, like in the box to blitz him. They do all sorts of stuff. And like, I can't say what I want to say, but like, Daniel Jones loves taking sacks, guys. The pressure to sack rate last year, 31.6%. DeVito was the only guy that was even near that. So it is a combination of both quarterback and offensive line play. The offensive line is still a problem here. I think it's going to be really, really fascinating to see what happens here. I'm in on Minnesota at 1.5. I think the over is a great play as well, because I think we could see some big plays. Like when you blitz and don't get home, there's going to be some big plays in there too. And I don't like the Giants defense very much. I think they're going to be different in terms of what they're doing schematically. That's going to be very different this year. I think you're going to have some home run plays on the receiver side, like you kind of said there, Matt. So, they're taking over at 41.5. We're kind of under right around some key numbers. I think that there's some pick six upside here too, right? Both these quarterbacks love to throw the ball to the other team. So I think there's so many ways for this over to hit too, in terms of big plays, defensive stuff, strip sacks, all that stuff. So Vikings and the over. It's one of my favorite games of the week.
Twist my arm, Ryan. Twist my arm.
Let's go.
Steven broke his finger getting that into his count. Malik Neighbors' longest reception, 22.5 yards. Like, for everything that you just said, on the 3 or 4 times that the blitz doesn't get home and Daniel Jones just closes his eyes and throws it down the field, like, it wouldn't surprise me to see Malik Neighbors with like a 45-yard reception in this game, 50-yard reception, something like that in this game. So maybe that's an angle I go and head in on, because I do like thinking about that. Denver Broncos and the Seattle Seahawks. This is your other kind of big spread of the week to round things out. 6 points in favor of Seattle at home. 41.5 is our total here on this one. Bo Nix will get the start for the Denver Broncos. It was no surprise to a lot of people out there that he was going to be able to win that job. I think whenever Sean Payton decided he was going to take him as early as he did in the first round, the decision was already made. But, again, we got to have some theater in the offseason with all of this. A lot of people liking Seahawks this year. Ryan, you alluded to it earlier on in the show. You kind of get you kick grandpa out the door, and now you're trying to go with some stuff here. That being said, we get DK Metcalf coming out yesterday saying that, like, yeah, we're going to be a run first team here, and he's excited about that because he thinks it's going to create some opportunities for him down the field. So yeah, okay, we'll try to connect those dots with all of that. I hope that this is not going to be the case. You have 3 good receivers and at least a decent floor quarterback there for Seattle. Another popular survivor pick this week. I think a lot of people are going to be on the Seahawks given the spread here in this one. Ryan, what do you think about the 6 points in the 41.5?
Yeah, it feels chalky. There are some expensive 5.5s, and I think that is probably a decent look. I'm okay. I am buying everything Seattle. I'm on that bandwagon, absolutely, for sure, this season. Part of it is I'm just drinking the Mike McDonald, just the Kool-Aid here. I think that what he was able to do with, again, I know this is going to sound like revisionist history in a bad way. I think last year's Ravens defense on paper was pretty average in terms of like actual talent. Like Kyle Van Noy was pulled off of the set of Pat McAfee midseason and like got like 9.5 sacks, right? Like Justin Matabuke was really good, but 13 sacks is like not who that guy is. We got like Davion Clowney and dusted him off and made him really good again too. They had some issues at cornerback and those guys started to play really well. And you have good coverage linebackers. So part of it, and look what like McDonald did 1 year in Michigan and kind of flipped that around real quick too. So I think this guy has some juice. I'm buying everything. And I think there's a lot of talent on the Seattle defensive side, especially in the secondary. They could be multiple. They can go heavy with nickel and bring 3 safeties in, bring guys in the box, and those guys are all pretty interchangeable. I'm really excited about what they could do. Their defensive line is strong. Like Boye Mafe can win. I'm really excited about what can happen here. And then Ryan Grubb as an offensive coordinator, like I like the 3 receiver set stuff. I like the explosive upside of Kenneth Walker. The offensive line was a problem last year, but like they had kind of cluster injuries. They didn't get anything out of Abe Lucas and Cross. They were kind of both hurt for a large chunk of time at all the same time. So continuity, just bringing them back, I think is going to be better. Now, I'm down on Denver, but I think Denver's going to be an exciting over team because I think the offense might be okay a little bit. Like
I like the YOLO factor with the offense.
I do too.
I do. Yeah.
One of my favorite bets here is I hit the over on Bo Nix rushing at 16.5. Ran a pretty good amount in the preseason, has some mobility, ran a little bit in college too. And I think there's a lot of like, he's going to run into some outside of clean pockets just out of like fear and because of what McDonald's is going to be doing pre-snap and is going to really complicate things. So I like that edge on Bo Nix. I think like longest rush for Kenneth Walker is going to be an angle too, but I'm in on the over in the game and I'm okay laying 5.5 on the Seahawks too.
Steven, you and I talked a good bit about this game on the Survivor pod that we did. One of my entries certainly will be in on this. We'll see what I do with some of the other ones. But yeah, I do think that there's any like these super low totals. I'm at least somewhat intrigued here early on in the season as we get to some adjustments being made by, these rookie quarterbacks and stuff like, hey, short fields are good for overs and things. And if, Bo Nix makes some bonehead turnovers and some holds on the ball too long, gets strip sacked, whatever it might be. Like it works for us on an over standpoint as well. So always kind of looking towards an over here early on in the season with some of these teams making adjustments anyway.
Yeah, just a macro note too. Drew Dinzik, who I'm sure a lot of our viewers listen to and follow, I'm sure you guys listen to and follow. He kind of believes that the new kickoff rule is going to be worth on average, about 2 points per game to the total with better starting field position. So, I mean, that certainly fits in with what you guys are saying with this matchup. Low total of over 41.5 right now as we record Friday morning. I'll just kind of give my big picture thoughts on Seattle. I completely agree with what Ryan said. Matt, I know you agree from our preview pod. I think Mike McDonald, and Ryan, you tell me if you think this is hyperbolic. I think McDonald is Belichickian in his defensive game planning.
Yeah, I mean, look at the tree already. He's a young guy, but we've seen a bunch of guys that were part of his staff even last year in Baltimore actually now have defensive coordinator jobs right at the college level and in the NFL, right? Tennessee, Miami. Like there's just a lot that this guy's kind of been a part of. And yeah, I think there's kind of like the Midas touch situation here. I'm just kind of buying anything that he's a part of is pretty optimal. It's a guy that's been able to adapt based off of what the opponent's doing too. And I'm part of why I'm massively bullish on this team.
Yeah, completely opposite of what you mentioned with the Falcons defensive the Jaguars defensive coordinator, the former Falcons defensive coordinator, who's just going to run what he runs. McDonald's going to adapt his game plan week to week, shift up how much man and zone he's playing week to week, just depending on the offense he's facing. So that raises the floor to me. I love the weapons. I think Geno with these weapons is decent. Just the one big question I have is this offensive line. I'm hoping Grubb can mitigate that a little bit with his offensive scheming. That is clearly the big red flag with this team. However, in this matchup, I don't think it manifests. I mean, Denver is projected to have the number 31 defensive line by PFF coming in. So while I don't want to lay 6, I think that's pretty expensive for a team I have around league average in Seattle. I certainly think arrow up, but I think they're around league average to start the year. I am playing them in Survivor, so knock on wood, that's not the kiss of death. I always use bonus bets on one big long shot coming into the year that I've collected from golf, etc. And I don't want to do any long shots in the Super Bowl market because, the Chiefs are pretty freaking good. But I think the NFC is a little bit more wide open. I think you can poke some holes into the teams that are at the top of the NFC. So Seattle 35-1 to win the NFC was my bonus bet long shot look coming into the year. And you just hope that they get to the NFC Championship game, and then you can make some decisions on whether you want to monetize that ticket or not.
Las Vegas Raiders and the Los Angeles Chargers. This is 3 in favor of the Chargers at home. Air quote, home. 40.5 is our total here in this one. Steven, kind of back to one of the games we talked about earlier. So much unknown for me in this that what's Gardner Minshew going to look like a starter for the Raider? You got Justin Herbert coming off this injury where he couldn't play all preseason. Now he's supposedly fine. Throw into a wide receiver core that basically could be the 3 of us. I don't know. I don't. To me, this is just I'll watch it, obviously, because I want to see what's going on with both of these teams. But like from a bet standpoint, especially with it sitting on 3 and like, oh, this is just like, this screams pass. It was one of the very first games that I scratched off this week. And it's like, yeah, I'm not laboring through this game by having to sweat a bet.
Yeah, I was listening to our colleague Mo Nawara on our sister pod Gridiron Gamble. He goes on there with his buddies as well, and our director Brett Colson, and he made the point, like, if this is not a home game, and there's probably going to be more Raiders fans, like, how, if you're not giving any home field to the LA Chargers, how do you get the 3 here? And I kind of agree with them. So it doesn't mean I want to run in and back the Raiders, though, with an interim head coach who's been promoted because they're paying too many other fired coaches, and Gardner Minshew, who, in my opinion, I don't know if you guys watch any Raiders preseason or read reports. Like, I don't think he was the better quarterback. I think they're giving him the starting nod because they gave him $15 million guaranteed. It seemed pretty clear to me that Aiden O'Connell, especially in the dress rehearsal, outplayed Gardner Minshew. So you're getting a much more inferior head coach and quarterback combo versus Harbaugh and Herbert, right?
You can't go O'Connell Minshew, but you can go Minshew O'Connell, which is, it's like, so it's like if you have to make the switch, it's yeah. So it's just the guy that they brought in, air quote, to be the starter, gave the money to, it's easier to replace him than it is to like say, oh, you're benched, and then, oh, never mind, come off the bench and be the guy. So that's all it was. You're right. I mean, it's just,
yeah. So long story short, it's a pass for me because this is pretty expensive in my opinion for the Chargers at this point. But I have memories as a 49ers fan of Harbaugh taking over a roster that was middling at best and ripping off 13 wins. And most of the public not seeing it coming into the year because he's just going to run a more old school smash you in the face type of football that isn't as sexy and attractive as the passing offenses out there. So I wonder if him zagging and being more heavy up front and pounding the ball a little bit is going to catch some defenses that are built to defend the pass sleeping and smash them in the mouth early in the season here. So that's the one thing I'm going to be watching for as the season goes on. But this game in particular is a pass for me.
Yeah, he's smashing him in the mouth for the 17 snaps that J.K. Dobbins is going to stay healthy over the course of the season. Yeah, that's what's going to happen with that. Ryan, do you see anything here in this one?
The only thing I want to bet on, I want to get some side action on this game. This is going to be the first game in the late window that's over. I think both these teams just want to run the football and get this game over with. What is it? It's 4:00 Eastern. This game is going to be over by 6:30. You can be able to get down, watch the end of the Cowboys Browns game or whatever else is coming up because this game is long over. I'm with you guys. There's a lot of question marks. My podcast partner Connor Allen is way down on the Raiders. It's made me take like a pro Raiders take because I don't think they're necessarily that bad, because I do think they're going to win some games up front because they're going to be so disruptive that they're going to be able to cause some problems for other teams. But that's not really who the Chargers are. They got a bullish offensive line that they don't want to drive back a ton. They want to run the football and kind of dictate pace and tempo there. It's hard not to feel that there's some Harbaugh magic because the guy's just kind of done it in year one everywhere. And that feels like some sort of like recency bias, small sample noise, but it kind of proof is in the pudding there. So definitely a stay away. Want to find out a little bit more about who these teams are. They're two teams that I don't think I'm necessarily bullish on outside of the Harbaugh magic on the season.
Dallas Cowboys on the road at the Cleveland Browns. Browns are 2.5-point home favorites here over the Cowboys, a total of 41 pretty much across the board here. Talked about a second leg of a teaser that seemed very, very obvious. How about taking the Cowboys up to 8.5 here in this one, Ryan? I don't think there's a ton of commentary that's really needed in this one. It's a total of 41. We're getting a Cowboys team that's power rated pretty highly in just about everybody's ratings out there, up to 8.5 points against a team with a quarterback who, by the way, we hadn't seen throw a football yet. It's like, we don't even know if the guy can still play in the NFL. So it's like, I understand. Yes, there's a bunch of talent on the Browns team. And if you look at their 53, you're like, oh man, this team's super, super talented. But the problem is the most important position on the field is the one with the biggest question mark. And so give me 8.5 points for the Cowboys all day long. It's the second leg of the teaser. I usually like to wait a couple weeks into the season before I get heavily involved in teasers, but this one was just so blatantly obvious and just smacked me in the face the second that I saw it, that this one got in there and actually got in there pretty good for me. So again, I think it's a gift to be getting 8.5 in this one with the Cowboys. So that's the play for me.
It's the way to bet the game. It just is. It just is, bright, screaming at you right there, getting through the 3 and the 7 for, low total road team like that. It's kind of checking all the boxes that we want to find there for those games. I'm kind of fascinated to watch this game in general. I'm a little bit down on the Cowboys this season. I think it's a pretty massive shift in terms of scheme defensively. I don't know if it's necessarily a bad shift, but it's a big shift in terms of what Dan Quinn did. A lot of single high, a lot of man, take some risks on the outside versus Mike Zimmer plays a lot of zone, keep everything in front of you. And kind of how does that relate to how they disrupt? And that was really how they've made their hay the last couple of years in terms of, turning teams over, pressuring the quarterback, all those different things. Can they straight up beat you how they're going to line up? So I'm fascinated there. And then obviously the great unknown, as you mentioned, it's just how it's like kind of turnkey at this point, but I don't know how to handicap the Browns in a different way. Rest of it's really good. I feel very confident that it's a strong offensive line, strong defensive unit that's basically running it back, and they were dominant at times last season, especially against early in the season against bad teams. Got picked on a little bit later in the season. Part of that's just another team that's just like, this is what we do. Can you handle it? Maybe Dallas can, maybe they can't. I just don't love the surrounding cast outside of CeeDee Lamb. Running back room isn't great. The offensive line isn't what it used to be. It's a team that's just kind of gone 12-5 every year and got to the playoffs. I don't know if they have it in them this season, but again, I just have a really hard time doing anything with Deshaun Watson yet because I don't know who he is. So take the free teaser leg, watch this game. We'll probably know more in week 2.
Steven, one of the things I did point out last night on the old Twitter machine was the fact that if they're going to call this formation rule as tight as they are, these really elite pass rushers are going to find themselves in some pretty good positions. Micah Parsons, 13 and a half, and 14 sacks in his first 3 seasons of the NFL. The Cowboys play, and now that's not the case here for this Browns team, but this is just for a season-long type bet. The Cowboys play 8 bottom 10 offensive lines, and they play 2 more that are consensus in the bottom half of the NFL. So just something that I put into the account, not huge or anything, but like I'm kind of going to bet on the fact that some of these elite pass rushers are going to win even more than they have in the past, where these offensive linemen aren't getting 3 yards head start on them in pass protection. So one of the things I did want to at least throw out there, the Cowboys do play a pretty weak slate of offensive lines over the course of the season, and Micah Parsons obviously an elite pass rusher, but I know this is the other end of the teaser leg that you're on as well.
I am, yeah, and you guys have covered it, so I won't go into on the teaser leg. Did you bet Parsons Defensive Player of the Year?
I did not. I just bet his over on sacks.
Okay, I got you.
Yeah.
I don't understand why. It seemed like to me the line flipped to make the Browns a small favorite here as the CeeDee Lamb contract holdout continued, and then he's back in camp, and it hasn't gone back the other way here. Because I don't know. I guess our entire staff disagrees with the market. We all have the Cowboys rated slightly ahead of the Browns in our power rankings, and if it's insignificant for the most part in the spread because we're talking about numbers under 3 either way. But to your guys' point, if they're going to make them the underdog, it creates a great teaser opportunity.
Washington Commanders and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is 3.5 in favor of the Bucs at home. 42.5 is our total. Steven, I think everybody is talking about this. Ryan, you alluded to this early in the pod. Hey, everyone's just waiting on the regression monster to hit the Bucs this season. Listen, they did run on the right side of variance last year. It was an older team that avoided major injury and didn't get that cluster injury type stuff, didn't get like major injury deals at important positions, which, again, just doesn't really happen all that often in the NFL. So sure, they ran on the right side of variance. That's not to say this is going to come back and hit them this year, but I think, if we're just playing what we've seen over the test of time, that probably will be the case. But I'm just more interested in seeing what Jaden Daniels does out there against a real game, against a real team in real NFL, and see if he is as dynamic as he was in his senior season of college. I'll sit back and watch this one. Not really interested in getting involved. The only thing maybe on a Daniels rushing prop, because I do think that given my watching him a decent amount at LSU, I think his pull it and run it bug is going to be a little bit too much at the beginning of the season. I think they will tell him to not panic as much and calm down, and sometimes just go to your second and third reads and stuff, and taking a sack isn't the end of the world. But I think we're going to see a lot of kind of tuck it and run type stuff from him early on in the season. So that's at least intriguing to me, but that's about it for me in this one.
You tossed to me or Ryan?
Yeah,
Sorry.
you, dude. You.
Oh, my God.
That's how it goes. Yeah.
Are you new here, man? Come on.
Yeah. Seriously.
Week one for me too, I guess. Yeah, I agree with everything you said, and believe it or not, I was listening. I just didn't know if you tossed to me or not.
Yes, it's fine.
This is the weather game too this week. There's some rain in the forecast in Tampa Bay. Although it looks like the forecast may be improving compared to what I saw yesterday. Regardless, there's no wind. It's just rain. It looks like very calm wind, so it might not affect the passing games as much as people think. This total before the weather concerns shot up from, under 43 up above that key-ish number of 43. And now with the weather concerns, it's come back down. I bet the over. I'm at over 42 in this game. I think the Commanders secondary is really bad. And I am of the belief that Dan Quinn really feasted on some highly talented defensive players in Dallas that I'm not sure is completely not sure it's something he can replicate in Washington with the talent they have there. They're pretty bare in terms of their secondary and also their pass rush. So while I am not bullish on Tampa Bay, and this is not like similar to the Saints, this is not a team that I don't think I'm ever going to be lining up to lay more than a field goal with. I do think they're going to be able to move the ball, and Evans and Godwin can eat in this game. And if that happens, then I think you have at least, at worst case scenario, a backdoor here for Jaden Daniels to scramble around and, if needed, get the garbage time points to get over a low total of 42 here. But I'm not even sure that's going to be necessary.
I should have pointed out 37.5 is the number out there for Daniels on the rushing total. So I just think that's a little bit too low. Ryan, what say you here?
Yeah, I like that angle. I take some alts on that too, because the ceiling's probably pretty high. So you can get some plus money if he approaches 50, which I think could be of interest too. I think probably the angle would be over or nothing for me, just in terms of the spread. I don't have strong feelings. It's going to be, maybe rainy, definitely going to be swampy down there in Tampa Bay at this time of year. You get those Florida games early in the season. The teams, it's warm everywhere for the most part. Yeah. But it's still hot in Florida and muggy down there too. So that's obviously an angle there too. So you maybe tire defense, especially late in that game where you could see some, play breakers and things like that. So kind of a wait and see. Again, two teams I'm not really bullish on overall. I want to kind of see what happens with Jaden Daniels. I think taking away an offensive weapon is concerning, but we had a hard time getting anything out of Dotson for his first couple of years in the league anyway. So yeah, Tampa Bay was just so good in the red zone defensively last year. Is that sticky? That's not typically sticky year over year for them to be like top 3 in terms of red zone points allowed. So I think there probably is some regression there, though Todd Bowles has been another guy that's been able to get more out of his talent over the years. So over nothing, but I kind of like your ceiling look on Daniels on the rushing side.
Guys, as always, we'll be back for separate videos for Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football. But before we get out of here, bold predictions here. We can definitely change over the course of the season. I'm not going to hold everybody, to what we're saying right here. But Ryan, gut feeling as we enter week 1, you do at least have a little bit of sample size from Thursday Night Football. Who's your Super Bowl, and then who's your Super Bowl winner?
Super Bowl is, it's so hard to pick against the Chiefs. Chiefs are going to go back to the Super Bowl. We are going to, I guess, this is my pushback. I don't know how you restore something that was never there. So I don't know how the Lions actually ever restored the roar, but I think the roar is going to be born this season. I think the Lions are legit. Keeping both coordinators, I think, was massive. You get that nice schedule. Look, we can poke holes in Jared Goff all we want, but clean pocket Jared Goff is awesome. There's nothing in the numbers that tells you that Jared Goff is not an above average NFL quarterback when he's kept clean. He's playing in front of the best offensive line in the league. The Lions go down to New Orleans and upset the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl.
I love it, because if that's the case, then I'm going to win a whole bunch of my season-long prop bets and things like that. So yeah, I'm going to win a whole bunch of those. So I like that. Steven, what say you?
Listen, I'm a 49ers fan, and I'm not as bullish on them this season as I was last season. I think some teams are catching up to them. You guys mentioned the Lions. I think the Eagles' ceiling is there, although I want to see it first with these 2 new coordinators. So I've kind of bet some exactas already coming into the year. I want to bet the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, but I don't want to lay 5-1. So I've done a 50-1 exacta with Chiefs over Eagles. I've done a 50-1 exacta with Chiefs over the Lions. I've done a 50-1 championship parlay with UGA, the dogs in college football, parlayed with the Detroit Lions. So like this is the short list of championship contenders that I have. And I'm just going to use a unit or two and try and hit those ceiling outcomes with the teams I'm most confident in, because I'm not as confident in figuring out which of the NFC teams it is, but I feel like I got a pretty short list over there.
The Eagles get it done over in the NFC for me. They figure it out on the defensive side of the ball. I like their 2 draft picks and coming in and stepping in and making an impact there for them. The Eagles get it on the NFC side. On the AFC side, the offensive line did finally get it right. Cincinnati Bengals take it down on the AFC side of things, and Joe Burrow returns to New Orleans.
God, here we go again.
And leaves a loser because the Eagles win the Super Bowl. Joe Burrow goes down in New Orleans. Everybody going to be rooting for him down there, and it's not going to happen.
Jesus H. Burrow is back.
Yes, Philadelphia Eagles take down the Super Bowl. Ryan, cannot be more excited about this partnership with you guys, and glad to have you on here every other week with us, breaking down football games. Be sure and check out 4 for 4 if you guys have not done so already. Go over there. All of their great work, not only on the betting side, but also on the fantasy side of things. And Steven, as we say each and every week, everything we do, absolutely free. So hit that subscribe button, head to TheLines.com, take a look at everything that we've got going on over there. For Ryan, for Steven, I am Matt. Good luck on all your week 1 bets.